So, yes, thank you. If you'd like to move in a little closer, that would be great. But we have our mic; we'll do our best. So, this session is about county governance. My name's Cynthia Matthews. I'm just the moderator. I serve on the Santa Cruz City Council. Our featured speakers will be members of our County Board of Supervisors. Just a very quick intro. Our County Board of Supervisors are elected by districts, so each supervisor represents a geographical district. They're elected for 4-year terms. They serve someone to serve as their chair. Each year it's someone different. They oversee a huge budget that has to do with infrastructure, with parks and open spaces, with healthcare and human services. It's a vast department. So each supervisor tries to be attentive to the issues of their district and also keep in mind the needs of the entire county. So with that, I'm going to introduce them and ask them to give a brief background about what led them, introduce themselves, and what led them to run for public office. And we do want to save time for questions, so try and keep it maybe to 5 minutes, something like that. First of all, Bruce McPherson.
Hi, I'm a fourth-generation Santa Cruz County native, and my family has always been involved in public service. And my family did own the Santa Cruz Sentinel for 118 years. I was not there the whole time, but I was there for 26 of those years, and the news side of the newspaper, and editor for 10. I just learned from my family and their friends about the value of public service. And I'll tell you that when you give to public service and helping others, you're going to feel better than they do because you can see the difference. And there's so many things that you can do to help others here in Santa Cruz County. I was, after that tenure in the newspaper business, I retired sort of. And then the sitting assemblyman, Sam Farr, Leon Panetta, first of all, the icon of politics in this region, became the budget director under President Clinton before becoming his chief of staff. The sitting assemblyman, Sam Farr, ran for that office. Some people, and he won, and some people said, hey, Bruce, you can do this. And at that time, I was a Republican. I'm not now. I'm no party preference. They said, you're the only one that can win in this district. And I started to believe them, and we won in a special election. Was reelected to the Assembly and then elected twice to the state Senate, and then retired from politics, I thought. Then the Secretary of State, sitting Secretary of State, got into some problems and resigned, and Governor Schwarzenegger nominated me to be Secretary of State of California, which I was for 2 years and was confirmed unanimously by both the Senate and the Assembly. So that's my political career, and then had retired, so to speak. And then Mark Stone, who was just with us in the last group, ran for the Assembly, and he is a tremendous Assembly member representing our district now. And some people said, Bruce, why don't you've got some background knowledge and how these things are done. Why don't you run for county supervisor? And I did, won 5 years ago, and then was reelected, representing the 5th district of a small part of Santa Cruz, almost all of Scotts Valley, and the entire San Lorenzo Valley. And I love it. I love serving in the county level equally as much as I did in the state level.
Thank you. Yeah, I represent District 4. Which is most of Watsonville, all the way to Aromas, up to Mount Madonna, Santa Clara County line. And District 4 is different than the rest of the county. How many go to PV High or Watsonville High? So we got quite a few. And you know the issues that go on there. We have one of the highest costs of living in the United States in Santa Cruz County. And at the same time, in District 4, we have one of the lowest income per capita in the United States also. So we're dealing with a lot of agriculture land, trying to protect that. That's a big, $700 million $700 million that is brought in through the ag industry and in the county, and we have to protect our prime ag land. Just give you an example, it costs, if somebody owns some land and they want to rent out their farmland, it's about $2,500 to $2,700 an acre for a farmer to rent out his land and have it cultivated. Okay, you go out to other areas. We'll go to San Benito County. How much to rent an acre out there in San Benito County? About $600 an acre, $700 maybe. What's the difference? It's the soil. The soil in South County, District 4 and District 2, is some of the richest soil in the entire world. So it's got like 30 to 40 feet of topsoil, because over the years, hundreds of years, flooding, rains, and everything, all the topsoil from the mountains washed down and filled in the Pajaro Valley. So it's prime land, we need to protect it. It's not just the farm workers working out there. You have packaging, you have shipping, you have truck drivers, you have a tremendous amount of scientific work going on and trying to make the growth of strawberries, we'll take for example, and trying to figure out, we have about over 100 employees right now in South County that are dealing with the issues of ag land.
Greg,
So,
I think that's been a good introduction
You
to
bet.
an issue of concern to you, and let's have John do his introduction.
you bet. I was only going to go another half hour. So anyway, that's okay.
Well, hello, my name is John Leopold. I'm a county supervisor representing the 1st District, which is Live Oak, Soquel, Santa Cruz Gardens, all the way up to the summit. And I got involved with politics when I was 14. My hometown was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. There was a nuclear power plant there, and in 1979, it almost melted down. And that's when I realized that I need to get involved with community organizing. I had to educate myself about an issue, started working with others, and I've worked on doing community organizing activities throughout the rest of my life. And it's the reason why I'm a member of the Board of Supervisors is because that seemed the most logical extension of that work of doing community organizing, whether it be around environmental issues, healthcare issues, civil rights issues, or just local development issues. So if you care about your local issues, you can one day be standing up here as well.
And I'm Zach Friend. I'm also a county supervisor. I represent an area that includes basically Capitola down to Monterey County line on the coastal side, so Aptos, La Selva, part of Watsonville, and all of Corralitos. And as opposed to giving you my life story, I actually want to hear your questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to the moderator so we can get straight into your questions.
Thank you. And so let's hear what questions you have for our county supervisors. Yes. That's a really good question.
Not a dumb question. As you heard, the dumbest question is, yeah, what do you guys do? And we do really, having been in the state, as I mentioned, we do comparatively everything. We address every type of issue that you can imagine, from health services, which was mentioned, human services, water issues, although we're not a purveyor of the water, but we, parks, law enforcement, the sheriff's office, we do everything. Comparatively, in the state legislature, when you're one of 80 members in the Assembly or one of 40 members in the State Senate, you are assigned to committees, and your focus of probably 5 committees, and that's where your focus of attention is. Whether mine was education, public safety, and environmental protection. Those are the things that I really wanted to target, because there's so much that goes on in the state legislature. There's 2,500 bills introduced every year or more. And so that's the way the things are divided within the caucuses, the Democrat and Republican caucuses up in Sacramento. But here we address everything imaginable, and sometimes you can't imagine what it is. But it's just every subject matter in public service that we address at one type or another. The homeless housing issue is huge at this time. The cannabis implementation that's going to be becoming alive, and we have to set standards, and we really wanted local control, as each of the 58 counties in the state did. That's been maintained, and I think we, as a county on that issue, and many others too, are ahead of the curve on that and how we're going to implement that and make it work to the best of our abilities.
I'm going to interrupt. I think your question is, what do they do on a day-to-day basis? Was that? I will say, unlike the city councils who don't have direct staff who work for them individually, each county supervisor has a couple of aides who work for them, and in any given day, they'll be going to meetings with constituents, they'll be directing their staff, they'll be participating in collaboratives. So I think just in terms of they have priority issues, but how do you get that work done? I don't know if that was your question. So maybe, Greg, a quick answer, and then we'll hear.
I will. I'll make it short. It goes. We have a Watsonville office and we have a Santa Cruz office. For South County, it's a lot easier for people to visit our office, call us there, and make an appointment. So we spend a lot of time in South County. But what are the issues? What are the phone calls? We probably get about, I'd say about 15 phone calls a day. They can be as important as the Pajaro River, keeping that from flooding. We're working on a 100-year plan on that. It could be building a bridge over on Casserly Road that was washed out during the storms. And then it could be as small as a pothole in somebody's front yard, and they want it fixed. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is a big deal if you have to, drive over that pothole every day. I'll give you a quick example, and I'll pass it on. One person called up and said, look, there's a manhole cover on the street. Every time a car goes by, hits it with their tire, it goes clank, clank. I'm going crazy. I hear it all night. I hear it all day. Clank, 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 all right? So it sounded like an easy project. We put in a new manhole cover. It still clanked. And it's because of the way the circumference is. We went down to the yard there in the city of Watsonville. They have a bunch of old ones, and we found one that actually fit and doesn't clank anymore. So there you go. It was real important to that guy living there. Okay.
We don't call him Mr. Manhole for nothing. On any given day, there's a mixture of policy, advocacy, community work. So just yesterday, spent a number of hours in a regional transportation commission meeting talking about trains, automobiles, the highway, a whole bunch of things. Then right from there, I went to meet with a community group to talk about an ordinance that I'm going to be bringing to the board around alcohol, and trying to talk over with community members about what they wanted to see and what they cared about. Then later in the day, Supervisor Friend and I got to participate in a sanitation district meeting where we looked at the master plan for our sanitation system in the county. And then I capped off the evening with 90 members of a neighborhood talking about traffic issues. So you get to do a lot of different things during the day, and you end up reading, I think we read probably at least 1,000 pages a week for the different boards or commissions or committees that we serve on.
I've never fixed a manhole for somebody, but I'm glad somebody in the county is doing it for the rest of us. But I mean, so it really does depend upon the district that you represent. If you represent a city, as Greg does, then a lot of the day-to-day work's actually handled by the city council, like Lowell Hurst, who's here. If you represent the unincorporated area, as John, Bruce, and myself do, we are your first point of contact for every need that you may have with the government, right? So we hear from a lot of people that have everything from a need for the sheriff's office, or maybe it's a road issue, or maybe there's a house that's being built next to them that's too high, or maybe they have a vacation rental they don't like, or whatever. And the long-term stuff that John just mentioned, transportation planning, air pollution issues, climate change. These are all things that we're working on at a local level. So it can be as small as the pothole and as large as how are we going to address climate change from a local perspective for the next 50 years, or things that the board actually works on. It was a great question.
more than half the revenue we get or we spend, half the money we spend is from federal and state sources, and we have to follow their directives. We are agents of particularly the states, but the federal government will give you some money if you do this. I think the best government's local. I think it's more responsive, but that's the way the system works. Just over half of our revenue, though, comes from state and federal sources.
Let's get another question here. You next.
So the man in the middle said that his or district or county, the people aren't making enough money despite living in the most expensive area. So I was wondering, what are some economic policies that you would implement to ensure more equality of outcome, if that's what you're going for?
So I think the question was, what is the county doing to deal with the issues of economic disparities? Is that what I'm going to let Zach start, so it's not always.
Well, I also share a section of the South County with Supervisor Caput, and just to paint a picture, right, we represent areas with the highest unemployment in the county, and John is right behind us in a section of Live Oak, actually, that he has. But within my district, I have both the highest and lowest unemployment rates in the county in my district. So think about that. I have a 4% unemployment rate in Aptos, and there's a section that I represent in Freedom that has 27% unemployment. We have people who earn less than half of the median income of the United States in our district. And yet we live in an area that you have to earn $70,000 a year to afford a 2-bedroom apartment here. So we recognize that disparity, you hear about all the income inequality across the country and how fortunate we are to live here. It's happening right here. I mean, there is no question there's a massive inequality right here in Santa Cruz County. And I think we have very open, transparent conversations about it, even for some of the supervisors that don't represent that same level of inequality. I really do believe that they, on transportation issues and housing issues, and even where we will locate economic development within the county, really do try to ensure that that opportunity changes moving forward. So I want you to know this is something that we talk about very seriously and are very cognizant of. I'll pass it on to John.
There's several different ways in which we work on this issue, because we are very aware of it. Some of it is through policy. When the state took away funding for affordable housing, we decided to charge an affordable housing impact fee on new development. When we recognize that that what happens in the first couple of years of life, or the first 3 years of life, have a huge impact on brain development, our board voted to create a Thrive by 3 fund and start a nurse-family partnership program. In Live Oak, the community I represent, which is probably the most economically challenged part of my district, I started 4 years ago working on a programmatic response and worked to bring all the different organizations that were working in Live Oak to work together to figure out how we could support and strengthen families and ensure that everyone is successful from cradle to career. And it took about 2 years to get something going, but we have this program that we call Cradle to Career, which we try to leverage the collective impact of all these different organizations, whether it be the county, Health and Human Services, whether it be the school district, whether it be the health center, whether it be the Family Resource Center, the Boys and Girls Club, the First Five Commission, to try to support not only those kids in the school, but also their families, because families will be more successful if they can be supported, if parents and children are supported. So it's a mixture of both policy and program that we try to do to close the gap of inequality that we have here in Santa Cruz County. Well, the question when what are we doing to improve the infrastructure with all the people moving in here? So many of us were involved in this past year in trying to secure a new funding source to deal with our streets and roads. You know, the county maintains a 600-mile road system, which experts say we need about $12 million a year to maintain. In our last fiscal year, outside of storm repair, we spent $1.5 million. So that's obviously inadequate. After many years of discussion, through our roles on the Regional Transportation Commission, we led an effort around Measure D, which was on the ballot last November, which was a half-cent sales tax that would go to, the largest chunk would go to our local streets and roads, a large chunk to the highway, large chunk for the rail corridor, and support for our bus system. And so for the first time since I've been in office, we're actually going to have a lot more money for the county. It's almost a 2.5 times increase in the amount of funding. The state legislature also passed this year SB 1, which was a huge transportation funding measure, which you're starting to see because it's funded by increasing the gas tax, the vehicle license registration fee, a special fee for electric cars, and some special fees for diesel. But that we expect within 5 years will bring about $6 to $7 million more to the county road system. I'm not sure about the city, but you could start seeing we're getting a lot closer to that 12 that we need to maintain our infrastructure. The other thing that I'll just say is, as we look at increased development along our transit corridors, one of the issues we've been talking about as a board is how do we make sure that we have the infrastructure to support. If you're going to have a taller building, you need a wider sidewalk. You know, if you need to plan for all these pieces. So we're thoughtful as we create these plans to make sure that we have the resources to be able to support them.
I think actually the first thing that would be important to note is that we actually don't have that many people moving in here. It's very commonly believed that there's been this massive influx. When you look at the year-to-year growth in the county, it's actually very low, and it's generally below the state average in general. And the reason is it's exceptionally expensive and difficult to live here. But one thing that is true is over the last couple decades, nearly all of the not exclusively, but a lot of the housing growth has occurred in the south part of the county, specifically the city of Watsonville, yet most of the job growth has occurred in the city of Santa Cruz. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why we have traffic along Highway 1 in that situation, which is to say if you have everybody, the only place you can live is in the South County and all the jobs are in the North County, well, that's the corridor that's going to be problematic along SoCal Freedom and Highway 1. And so I think that on the infrastructure side, one thing that we don't discuss enough is its relationship with where the jobs are and where the housing is, right? It's true the roads are falling apart. It's true that the highway needs improvements. But if people lived closer to their job, they wouldn't need to use the infrastructure in the same way, right? So to see the problem in a greater context that way, to see the interrelationship between where people live and where the jobs are. And that's a problem going across the state where the affordable housing is generally further and further away from the job centers, where you have people having these issues. And the lack of investment on infrastructure, as you talk about, is a national problem. But we've been looking at that relationship, the interrelationship. So I think it's an important thing to note. It's easy to kind of blame it on outsiders or people coming in or moving in, and it's really, the data doesn't back that up. But land use decisions made by city councils and the Board of Supervisors over the last 3 decades have in part created a situation where you have a lot of jobs in one location and a lot of housing in another, and that becomes an issue on infrastructure.
Another key component of our infrastructure is water, which the county is not a purveyor. There's several water districts throughout the county. The city of Santa Cruz has its water system. It's hard to believe after last year's storm that we have a water problem here, but in the mid-county, the SoCal Creek Water District area, we're down there. They need to preserve their water as best they can. I see the same thing, not so much but somewhat in the Scotts Valley area where I represent. It is important that we coordinate our efforts to conserve our water. We do not get federal or state water sources coming into this county. We're one of the few that don't. We have Loch Lomond as a city water source that really brings in a lot of water to thousands of people. But to address this, the state, to partially address this, the state just passed legislation that by 2022 that counties or regions have a groundwater management program, which we are cooperating with the city of, in my district, the city of Scotts Valley, Mount Hermon, and some other water sources, the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, the Scotts Valley Water District, to register how much water is being used. We're doing this, we've got to do it in a cooperative manner. and recognize that we've got to address this and keep tabs on how much water we're using for the betterment of all. So there are some efforts going, but that's a huge issue that's outside of the county government's jurisdiction per se, but we are involved, John Leopold and I, for instance, in the Santa Margarita groundwater management system. That's board has just been, a Joint Powers Authority has just been established to see how we can cooperate and have the best use of our water and manage it to the best of our abilities.
I was glad to hear, quick.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I'll cut it short, but you know, jobs, schools, and also roads, right? When you mentioned the question, it was like, how do we deal with more people moving in and more stress on the infrastructure? Well, if you look at South County, and if you took that out of the growth in the county in the last census, 2010, the county population would have actually dropped. We have one of the youngest populations per capita in the United States, right there in Watsonville. Our schools are full. That's part of infrastructure. We have to have schools for them. We have to have roads leading to and from the schools. So it's a tremendous stress. What we have to also watch out for is the middle class moving out, and we're going to have upper class income and lower class income and no middle class. That's where jobs come in, and that's where people want to work locally, and they don't have to put a lot of stress on the highway and everything like that.
I'm going to make just a couple of infrastructure questions, then we'll get a question from back there. I was glad. Did you have a question? Yeah, but I just want to make a quick comment. I'm glad to have an infrastructure question. It tends to be the ignored ingredient in a lot of other more hot button issues. But in terms of water, you may be aware that our water system here is entirely self-contained. Every time you turn on the tap, you're either drawing from wells, which have been overdrafted historically, both in South County and Mid-County, and I guess out in Scotts Valley area, or rain, and that's it. And so we have to manage that very carefully. And there is, after our 4-year drought, much more state leadership, and there's also a groundwater agency for the Mid-County area, which Supervisors Friend and Leopold are on that. I represent the city, and there are a number of other districts. So again, really focusing on something that is staring us in the face for the future. We're under a state mandate and also just reality to come up with a solution. Also, it was mentioned, John mentioned this legislation that was passed increasing the taxes for transportation, but there's a movement now to get an initiative on the ballot that would repeal SB 1. And so we have been very much counting on that revenue to maintain our roads, to sustain our transit, to invest in new transportation. But, you know, you're going to have a chance, if that gets on the ballot, you're going to have a chance to vote on it. Do I want to vote for the resources necessary to maintain and improve our local transportation infrastructure or not? So that, you know, if someone's asking for your signature in front of a grocery store, ask them what it's about. Is it something you want to support? So I think in the orange shirt you had a question? Yeah. Question, who represents Corralitos?
Great. We split that section, but just so you know, so Hazel Dell, for those of you who don't like to get out much, is a road that was in bad shape before the storms and now is actually in some respects catastrophic shape post the storms. And Greg and I have worked together very closely on this with our state representatives and federal representatives, and we did secure, as the county worked hard on this, federal funding for it. And it's actually one of the priority projects for the county and will actually be repaired next year, meaning 2018, which is very fast for the kind of government work we do, and it will actually be in better shape than it was before the storms, which is an important thing to note. But it is a rural road, and it was in bad shape. But for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I mean, part of this road is literally collapsed in some parts. into the ravine on the side, and it's dangerous to even have one car driving on it, nonetheless two. But that's something we've worked together on and shows the need for collaboration because we have either sides of the street functionally on Hazeldale and how we represent it moving up.
Your local government you saw your local government being responsive, but very much relying on the state and federal resources, collaborating and taking time for the solution to happen, a common theme.
I've been out there as recent as about 2 weeks ago. We have a work order, but the money and the funding, it goes on priorities. Of course, where more people live, they're going to get a higher priority. But Hazeldale is a definite problem. People can be actually trapped up there during the storm. I believe, do you live up in that area? Yeah, so you had to go way out and around in order to, instead of going on a 10-minute commute, you had to go on about a half-an-hour commute. We realize that, and we are working on it. It's the dividing line between his district and mine. In some ways, that's good. It gives us 2 votes on trying to get something done out there. But I know you're talking about by the Estrada Ranch and all of those out there. Yeah, we're looking at it very closely. I can't promise you it'll be fixed right now, but it will be fixed.
I think we've got time for one more question, and I saw a hand up over.
The question was, what reason are some of these conservative legislators in the state legislature, why do they want to have a referendum to kill Senate Bill 1 or SB 1? Because they say it's a new tax and it wasn't approved by the whole state in essence. And so they're trying to get the number of signatures to put on the ballot to qualify it, and then if a majority of the voters say yes to that, then we repeal it. Then we lose our tax structure, which is statewide, it's $5 billion a year. Now, I don't know who likes to pay taxes, but if you want your roads fixed, you're going to have to pay for it. What?
It is.
It's a tax. It's 12-cent sales tax on gasoline, 20 on diesel. Then there's some fee structures different depending on your value of your car and vehicle registration. And is it $75 on electric vehicles? $75, $125, $100 on. So those were all put into effect. And this took, and I'll tell you, local governments throughout California. Our county is a member of the County State Association of Counties, League of California. We really pushed for that because we know the value of that. And another part of that is that when we passed Measure D last November, the legislature did this late in the session this year, we became what was called a self-help county. That means we have helped ourselves by taxing ourselves to have road improvements. When you're there, you're one of 24 out of 58 counties, and the state will help you in granting funds to your projects because you're helping yourself. So it's a very important element of that the whole picture. But if they're, well, I don't know. I don't want to apologize.
It's the weeds, and you know we have to break up. I'll give you one more sec, Greg. But we're going to have to break up. Our time has concluded. But I know many of the panelists here would love to talk to you immediately after or during lunch. So I hope you have another question. And I just want to make a final comment. Local government is extremely accessible. The supervisors have offices. They have staffs. You can email, you can call, you can convey your issues to them. So you'll have many other chances to communicate.
Closing remark, real quick.
No.
We're not doing the closing words.
Okay, real quick. If you're going to get gas in your car, get it before next week. It's going to go up 12 cents a gallon. It went up? It went up recently. Okay, and the other thing would be with your schools, we're working on trying to get those schools open. They're building fences, locking you out. Neighborhoods want to use playgrounds. They want to use schools. Taxpayers paid for them. I'm saying open up those gates, tear down those fences around your schools. People use them. They use the playgrounds. You go and play catch or pick up football games or whatever. So those are school issues. And lastly, the big game tonight is Watsonville High against PV High. I'll see you there.
So I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank the volunteers and organizers and the people who put this on. What a great event.